Here's what's coming up on The World Today. CIA Director William Burns says Mr. Putin may seek revenge on Wagner boss Prigozhin. Plus, Pentagon says it cannot speak about the condition of Travis King detained in North Korea. Welcome back. Defense officials from Australia and the United States are set to begin their largest ever combined military exercises. Speaking from the USS Canberra docked at Sydney Harbour, Australia's Defense Minister Richard Marles and US Secretary of the Navy Carlos Del Toro also confirmed their commitment to strengthening strategic military ties between their nations and other allies. Australian defense officials were tracking a Chinese ship off their eastern coast that is expected to monitor the exercises. The chief of joint operations at the Australian Defence Force says the presence of a Chinese ship is not uncommon. More than 30,000 military personnel from Australia, the United States and 11 other nations will all participate in the biannual Talisman Sabre War Games starting from July the 22nd to August the 4th.
All of this is actually building muscle memory between our two countries' defence forces, is building comfort and familiarity, and obviously not just between Australia and the United States, but the other 11 countries that will be participating in the course of Exercise Talisman Sabre. It's actually about ensuring that we are becoming much more familiar with each other and able to operate at a much higher level in a much more coordinated way.
The most important message that China can take from this exercise and anything that our allies and partners do together is that we are extremely tied by the core values that exist amongst our many nations together. And we are prepared to actually operate together in defense of our national security interests and in defense of the core values that we all share as Western and non-Western countries working together. I often talk about the greatest strength that we have as a nation, and it is the strength of our friends, of our allies and partners working together, whether it's here in the Indo-Pacific and Central and South America on UNITAS, whether it's in Europe. That's the strength of free nations working together as one.
The Pentagon has been unable to offer any information about the condition of Private Travis King after he dashed across the border into North Korea on Tuesday and will not say if it believed he was alive. North Korea has remained silent about King, and U.S. officials are saying that Pyongyang has not responded to communication from the American military about the soldier. North Korea's state media, which has in the past reported on the detention of U.S. nationals, has also not commented on the incident so far.
I just have a few things here at the top. All I can say is that from when he crossed over to the DMZ, we know he is in custody of the North Koreans. But beyond that, in terms of his condition, I can't speak to that. There is no sign of engagement from the North Koreans. We don't have, we've always maintained that we want to have diplomatic channels remain open. We've always wanted to ensure that there is military-to-military cooperation and communication, but sadly, there's not on the North Korean side. You've heard from my NSC counterparts that there has been engagement at their level to Sweden and other, interagency efforts to try and engage North Korea, but we just have not heard back on this issue.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Army is expressing deep concern over how North Korea might treat Private Travis King, and then said that Washington is fully mobilized in its effort to reach out to Pyongyang, including by using United Nations communication channels. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth, in her first public comments on the case, said it remained unclear why King ran across the border into North Korea, but acknowledged that he is probably concerned about facing further disciplinary action from the Army upon his return home to the United States. Wormuth was speaking at the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado.
He's being held by the North Koreans, obviously. He was taken into custody when he ran across at Panmunjom. And, the Department of Defense, the State Department, the White House, we're using UN channels, have been reaching out to the DPRK to get information about his status and to work with them to try to, bring him back, obviously, to the United States. But at this time, I don't think very much is known, and I don't think that we have successfully made contact with the North Korean authorities. We haven't had a soldier go into North Korea for many, many years. I'm not sure that it has, frankly, significant consequences for the Army as an institution. I think what we want to do is get that soldier back into our custody. I worry about him, frankly. I know everyone here remembers what happened when Otto Warmbier was, taken into custody by the North Koreans and I think treated brutally, obviously. It makes me very, very concerned that Private King is in the hands of the North Korean authorities. I worry about how they may treat him, so want to get him back.
Let's talk weather now. Heat waves engulfing different parts of the world are expected to persist through the month of August as temperatures continue to shatter by weathering conditions. But the World Meteorological Organization has said earlier this week that it expected temperatures in North America, Asia, North Africa, and of course the Mediterranean to be above 40 degrees Celsius for a prolonged number of days this week as the heat wave continues to intensify. While Southern Europe is grappling with a record-breaking heat wave during the peak of summer tourist season, prompting authorities to warn the population of an increased risk of health problems and even death. Extreme weather has also disrupted the lives of millions of Americans, with dangerous heat stretching from Southern California to deep south, sweltering heat and also hitting the Middle East. According to a senior extreme heat advisor for the WMO, John Nyren, heat waves could not only become more frequent, but also spread across the seasons.
We have seen extraordinary heat, and in Europe and in the belt around the Northern Hemisphere, the peak heatwave season rises through January into August. And the planetary waves that lock in these systems that are developing these heat waves are quite difficult to dislocate. They are quite difficult to dislodge. So they're relatively stationary. So we should expect, or at least plan, for these extreme heat waves to continue through August. Well, we know that global warming, we're on trend and seeing a rise in global temperatures. So that will contribute to heat waves increasing in intensity and frequency. And what also happens is they spread across the seasons in time. We've got quite clear indications that they're already growing out into spring. It's the area which we are seeing the strongest growth in heat waves. So they're going to dominate at least half the year in the near future. On the evidence of the trend that we're seeing, we should not expect a stationary climate. So in that changing, warming environment, there is no new normal. It just will continue to change. And all the evidence points to the fact that we'll see increasing intensity and frequency of extreme heat waves. Oh, look, there's very strong evidence that if we were to eliminate fossil fuels, we would reduce a major contributor to what we're seeing. So where we have the opportunity to move away from those fuels, and effectively if we can electrify as much as possible, we individually can make a difference, and obviously governments can make policy decisions that will help that as well. So in the end, it's not impossible to fix it, but it is here for a long time. We can't turn it around in a hurry, but we certainly can take action. Well, certainly in the global climate signal, we are seeing minimum temperatures rise faster than the maximums. So that's in a climate sense, but also in the weather sense within these heatwave systems. Once we build up enough heat, we do see the minimums begin to rise, and that means we will be experiencing sustained high temperatures for longer during a day. That builds up the heat in the environment. That is when we lose the capacity to recover overnight, and that's very dangerous.
Well, it's victory for the Conservative Party as it won Boris Johnson's former parliamentary seat on western fringes of London. And that happened earlier today. The Conservative Party candidate Steve Tuckwell won the by-election with a majority of 495 votes. However, Conservatives lost a parliamentary seat of Somerton and from Ain, southwest England. But Labour also won the constituency of Selby and Ansea from the Conservatives by 4,000 votes after an ally of Mr. Johnson resigned in solidarity. Welcome back. We're now in Sudan, where the Darfur governor and former rebel leader, Mini Arko Namwani, has renewed his call for civilians in that region to take up arms to defend themselves, saying the current situation necessitates that. He said his administration is leading efforts to stop the fighting between the Rapid Support Forces and the army, especially in the region of Darfur. He has made similar remarks in the past, raising fears that Darfur, which is divided into 5 states, could descend into an all-out civil war amid growing ethnic tensions. But elsewhere in the country, fierce fighting was reported between the army and the RSF in Khartoum, Omdurman and Bahri, which are the 3 cities that make up Sudan's capital. Eyewitnesses in Khartoum say the army carried out the heaviest airstrikes so far against the RSF positions in several areas, but the army said it killed 18 RSF fighters in clashes in Omdurman and Khartoum. The fighting has persisted despite continuous indirect talks between the army and the RSF representatives in the Saudi city of Jeddah. Meanwhile, the prolonged armed conflict in Sudan has worsened the level of hunger in that country, with food stocks in many regions running out and supply channels disrupted by the war. In Sudan's capital, Khartoum, and its neighboring cities, more than 90% of the food processing factories have all been forced to close down. Only one grist mill remains operational.
The ongoing conflict in Sudan, now entering its 4th month, has practically cut off all supply channels to the metropolitan area of Khartoum, resulting in extreme scarcity of bread, dairy products, and other types of food. Muhammad Ali runs one of the few grocery stores that remain open in the southern part of the country. The store's stock on food items is drastically running out.
Basic necessities are extremely scarce. The inventory is dwindling and the price is constantly rising, with no sign of stopping. The products' prices themselves are already high, and the cost of transporting them are also not cheap.
Most businesses in Omdurman had either run out of stock or chosen to close in light of deteriorating security conditions. Meanwhile, people's savings have dwindled, as almost everyone lost their source of income after the conflict broke out, leaving many families to get by with one meal a day.
Our situation is rather dire, especially economically. Many people haven't received pay or pension for over 3 months.
Residents are hoping to gain more assistance from humanitarian aid organizations. Yet with battles continuing, relief supplies are still inaccessible in many areas.
With the ongoing conflict and the imperfect ceasefire, it makes it more difficult for us, the humanitarian actors, to deliver assistances, and they are life-saving assistances to the ones who are in need.
The country's hunger situation may further deteriorate, as farmers can hardly get crops planted in time due to a lack of funds, seeds, and fertilizers.
in South Africa, which has some of the world's worst rates of violent crimes, fear of rape is a commonplace, and those who can afford it often take self-defense classes. Instructor Dominic Olfsson brings classes to women in disadvantaged communities who are unable to pay the rates for these trainings.
This is Dominic Olfsson. She's teaching some young women and girls self-defense to avoid being raped. According to the South African police, between January and March 2023, more than 10,500 rape cases were reported in South Africa, just a bit less from a little over 10,800 in the same months last year. Experts say for every case of rape recorded, many more go unreported. Many resort to classes like this to learn self-defense, but some cannot afford the fees. That's why Dominique teaches rape defense in a 2-day class, free of charge, that she began in 2020.
With the rape defense class, it's a very, very sensitive subject for a lot of women. I teach girls from disadvantaged communities, and the minute you get to the rape defense section of things, they shut down because it's so personal and it's so close. And for a lot of people, it's close to home.
She uses movements based on Kala, an Israeli combat system, to train them to defend themselves against attackers. Olfsson says she's driven by empowering other women. In the country's capital, Pretoria, Olfsson offers her course to young and older women alike. A suburban father, Malisela Mukonyani, sent his daughter to take courses. Like any parent in a country where rape and gender-based violence is as prevalent as in South Africa, he is worried what might happen to his daughter when she's out.
I think parents must ensure that as a start, this becomes part of the agenda of the everyday conversation among ourselves, with our children, when we go to these meetings at school, in our communities, everywhere.
Malisela's teenage daughter, Camo, is aware of the risks. Even with training, she knows that such a situation would be a challenge to get out of.
Dominic told me that she's not looking to get me out of there without scratches, or it's not pretty. The whole thing isn't pretty. And I'm going to leave the fight scratched up, bruised, and hurting. But as long as I got out of there alive and I've survived, and I think that's very impactful to me.
She attends the classes where she learns to disarm an armed assailant, how to push someone away who might pin her down.
Roll. 90 degrees, come on, get off it, get off it, get off it. 90 degrees. Okay, that's it.
Further south in the township of Vosloorus, other teenage girls echo this sentiment.
Move, elbows.
Londiwe Kumalo, founder of the Canaan Organization, a local community program, is concerned about the young women in her community. She is aware of the challenges and traumas that women face in the township. But women's activists say rape defense classes are only part of the answer to a growing concern in the country where the victim or survivor gets blamed for the crime. In their opinion, communities need to start transferring the blame onto both the perpetrators and the enablers.
Let's talk about more weather conditions now. Heavy rains have been pummeling Huaqiang, which is a sprawling municipality in southwest China, causing widespread flooding as authorities issued heightened warnings today. Workers waded through knee-deep brown water, attempting to lift drain covers in the city, while vehicles slowed to a crawl in some districts. Police are now directing traffic in the heavy rain. The storms have been relentless in 28 districts and counties of Huaqiang since Thursday, with a record-breaking maximum daily rainfall of 227 millimeters. That's equivalent of about 8.9 inches posted in one Zun district. But elsewhere in India, rescue teams have resumed a search today for possible survivors of a massive landslide in the western region, which killed 16 people and is suspected to have trapped even more than 100 people. The land gave way in the middle of Thursday night in the remote mountain hamlets in the state of Maharashtra, about 60 kilometers from Mumbai, flattening several houses and trapping many who lived there. Disasters linked to rains have killed more than 100 people in India, mostly in the north, since the onset of the monsoon season on June the 1st. You see angry women there in India's northwestern state of Manipur have attacked the house of the main suspect in a sexual assault case that has enraged the nation. Local women shouted while using long sticks to damage the walls of the house before setting it ablaze with burning hay. The suspect allegedly dragged 2 tribal women onto the streets in May and then later incited a mob to rape and parade them naked. The sexual assault, which occurred over 2 months, captured national attention after a short video went viral on social media earlier this week. The main suspect was arrested on Thursday, hours after Prime Minister Narendra Modi condemned the alleged sexual assault. We're back to Britain politics, where it's victory for the Conservative Party as it won Boris Johnson's former parliamentary seat in the western fringes of London earlier today. We told you about that story earlier, but Labour has also won the constituency of Selby and Anstey from the Conservatives by 4,000 votes after an ally of Mr. Johnson resigned in solidarity.
Tuckwell Stephen, commonly known as Steve Tuckwell, the Conservative Party candidate, 13,965. The number of ballots rejected. The number of ballots rejected was 77, and I hereby declare that the said Steve Tuckwell is duly elected.
I'm humbled and proud to be elected as the MP for the area in which I was born, raised and built a family in, and to represent my home is a huge honour.
And the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's governing Conservatives lost 2 strategically important parliamentary seats on Friday, July the 21st, but unexpectedly retained Boris Johnson's old constituency in the setback for the opposition Labour Party. The Conservatives' narrow victory in Johnson's seat gives the Prime Minister some breathing space to try to narrow Labour's large lead in the polls by aiming to reduce high inflation and ease the cost of living crisis ahead of the national election next year. But the scale of the challenge is highlighted by the loss of 1 safe Conservative parliamentary seat of Selby and Anstey in North East England. And we end the program in Turkey with a selfie-taking cow. A university student and farmer in Turkey's southwestern town of Sidi Kereme found a perfect selfie-taking method with her cow. Well, the cow's quirky run to take a selfie as the owner pulled out the camera has gone viral on social media. You can see the cow jumping as she runs to the owner after being called to have a selfie together. Sharif Wilmaz, who takes care of the animals on her family's farm, trained her cow Mentlim to run for the camera when she called for a selfie. In that video, which received over 11.5 million views on social media, Meltem, the cow, ran and then posed with Yilmaz, and she asked to take a selfie together. Well, we see there's a lot with dogs and cats, but with a cow, I mean, that is fascinating. And on that beautiful note, we end the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Lawrence.